them. We find out at 7:05. But first, memorable moments when the Munster All Blacks clash of 1978.
What's so special about Limerick? The crowd. Simply the crowd. It's just a fantastic place to play. The atmosphere is electric, and apart from being great supporters, they're also fantastic critics, and they would be the first to let you know if you were making a fool of yourself. But it's full of passion, it's full of pride, and of all the places where I've played, it's the place I've always enjoyed playing in the Munster jersey.
It's true to say Limerick is the home of Irish rugby, and even in Munster, Cork people will, most of them will agree with that, yeah.
Great lovers of rugby, very passionate about their rugby, and really enjoy their rugby. They don't take it overly seriously, but there's just huge enjoyment about the game.
In Limerick, I tell you, everyone follows rugby. Whether you're the dustman or whether you're the bank manager, everyone. You know, there's great underage and there's working men's clubs, and you know, young Munsters now originally were, you know, people who worked in CIE, fellas drove trains and things. But you know, there was a great ethic for the common rugby.
Limerick being the home of Irish rugby, you would have said, yeah, it probably is, and you would agree that the public in Limerick are very rugby knowledgeable. Anywhere, any pub, any taxi, anywhere you go.
The All Blacks are the greatest rugby nation in the world. Rugby is a religion in New Zealand. It's the ambition of every youngster in New Zealand to wear an All Black shirt.
Still the only score on the board. Ireland 3 points from a penalty. Burgess. That's the one that looks for the gap.
When I played against them in the 70s, they were unquestionably the best rugby side in the world, and had the form, great players, fantastic discipline, played almost like a machine. So any win against New Zealand was a memorable achievement in one's career.
Trying the wheel. Going, struggling free. Look at that strength. He's in the score.
Their history and tradition is always geared to doing the right things, coming up with the answers. They always learn from the previous game. They learn from the last ruck or the last liner. They change their game. They're so adaptable. They can handle things, do things, and they can change the tack right through a game.
Anybody who represents or gets selected for the All Blacks, they can't be weak, Claire. There's just too many people vying for the positions.
The All Blacks would be, and still are, the team everybody gauges themselves against, and having played against them 3 times, we still haven't beaten them at international level, and you know, it's a very difficult. They're a very difficult side to play because, you know, at times they're just awesome.
But I think everybody has found it hard to beat the All Blacks over the years. You've only got to look at their record going back over a century. It's not only Irish teams have found it difficult to beat them. All teams have found it very, very difficult to beat them. Whether it's at home or whether it's away, their record says it all. The statistics say it all.
That 1978 season, usually before Christmas, Irish teams don't do very well. But that year, they had Munster had 1978 had a very astute coach in Tom Kiernan, and he realised very much that you needed to be much better, much fitter, much more practice, much more match practice. So he brought them to England, and they played Middlesex, I think, and somebody else, London Irish as well.
I think it's helpful to any team if they have a big game coming or if they have a competition coming to have a few warm-up matches, and it gives people an opportunity to watch them collectively and to see who might be playing well or who not or whatever. And it also helps to create a spirit, I think, and particularly in those days an away trip for provincial players was very rare. So that was a great sort of bonding experience. I think that's the in word now for it.
It certainly wasn't a successful tour in that they were absolutely murdered against Middlesex in the old Wasps grounds in Sudbury. I was at that match. But I can distinctly remember it didn't worry Tom Kieran. It was a means to an end for him, you know.
We had heard about those results, and I think they were beaten something by like 40 or 50 points the previous week. So we obviously didn't rate their chances, and I guess the mind plays tricks on you. You think it's just a matter of turning up on the day.
But the benefits of going across, irrespective of the results, were always there to be worked on, and i.e. team spirit, camaraderie, getting used to each other away. It was always going to be a positive to go and play a couple of matches before a big game like that.
Yeah, we were aware that Munster hadn't played very well. They'd lost their games reasonably convincingly. And when you're playing at an international level, you don't always take too much notice of that because it's the way the teams get up on the day.
Bonding was very important because you're drawing from all the clubs in Munster. So Shannon, Garryowen, Cork Constitution, we'd all have our own agendas. And it was important, to get the players to come together. Unlike today, where all the players are one and train together, we all train with our clubs.
The game against Middlesex certainly woke us up, and we got well beaten there. And the Exiles, we drew with them. So yeah, I think it was a good preparation for us.
Middlesex was one of London counties, and I think they hammered us by 30 points to 3 or something like that. And then the All Blacks arrived on the scene. And they beat London counties, of which Middlesex just won. They beat them Tuppy 7-6 or something like that. So the trap was laid for those guys. They went out for a kind of a warm-up job before the international, I'd say,
I think probably deep down we all thought it might have been the sort of game that we would just like to finish up, get a win and move on to the test match, which was not too far ahead.
The morale the night before, I would have said, was pretty high, particularly after Kieran's team talk in the hotel the night before, and also in the hotel before we left to go to the ground. Believe it or not, the bus actually got stuck in traffic getting to the ground, and all I can remember of the pre-match build-up itself was that we were in a rush to get out on the pitch in time for the kick-off. Now, in many ways, I think that was a great advantage because a lot of teams play their best game in the dressing room before they go out. They get too worked up and sometimes too nervous. There's a lot of energy wasted. But we were on the pitch and the game was on before we really knew it.
They had a reputation, but at that time we'd been travelling pretty good and we'd been winning most all of our games. So we felt pretty confident, but at the same time you respect history, but history doesn't win the game on the day.
The lead up to the game was strictly under the control of the coach, who was dictating what was going to happen and how it was going to happen. The captain's role was more on the field of pitch, carrying out what the tactics and plans were devised for the game prior to that. So my role, strictly speaking, would have been fairly minimal in terms of the pre-match preparation, tactic-wise. Yeah.
In actual fact, we cheated slightly in that, and Saturday, none of us played with our clubs. And we actually trained on the Saturday. I think officially we shouldn't have, but we had a session and then went home. And so when we arrived on Sunday, the form was good. We had done a lot of work down from May on the Wednesday nights, from the time we came back from London. And we had a good session on Saturday and Sunday outside in St Munchin's College. And it felt good.
The thing that we had, which was quite refreshing, was that we weren't carrying any baggage. We hadn't been to the UK before. The majority of the squad were quite young and inexperienced at international level, apart from the Haydens, the Robertsons, and the Bill Osborns and the Brian Williams, Frank Oliver maybe. The rest were just green-faced kids.
Well, it was unusual in many ways in that you never came together for that length of time, and it was just the way it tied in that it was a bank holiday weekend, so we were actually together on the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday in the build-up to the game. I can't remember exactly what he said when we went in the door that day, but what I do vividly remember was straight down to work. Like it was straight into preparation for the object of the weekend. The one thing with Tommy, because I worked with him on the Irish side as well throughout those years, and the one thing Tommy was very heavy on, because it was obviously pre-professionalism, was the whole attitude to your dietary needs. In other words, when you went to a hotel, you tended to break out and really enjoy the food. And the first thing Tommy always emphasised, whether it was with Ireland or with Munster, was watch your food for the next few days. So that was certainly part of it. I can remember that.
And New Zealand knew before they even went on tour that they were going to hit a few black spots, and Munster would have been one of those. And in the days leading up to that game, they would have selected their side very carefully, knowing that it was going to be a very physical confrontation. And they got what they expected, but what they didn't expect it was the ferocity of it.
I think when you go away with any team, you try and analyse what your strengths are, and we certainly had some very good backs. And you know, if you look back over the previous couple of years, we'd played against the French with a very young and inexperienced pack and got pretty well hammered up front on the first test in '77, and come back and played a really open, fast game in the second test. And probably to a certain extent, because we'd had success with that game, we carried that game on a little bit. Obviously, first 4 games we'd scored a lot of tries and done well on the backs.
Tom's game plan was based upon what he had seen from a video that he got of the previous 4 games the All Blacks had played in the UK prior to coming to Ireland. Television wasn't, UK television wasn't easily available in the south of Ireland at the time, and it was difficult to find out exactly what they were doing and what they were like. So Tom had gotten a friend to video some of their games, and from that he based his tactics on how to approach this game against the All Blacks.
I guess at that stage we were played reasonably well. We'd played some strong sides and we'd had some quite good wins and scored some pretty expensive tries.
I didn't go to any of them, and we didn't have half the television that we have now, but I did get some films of the matches just prior to the Munster game, and they were helpful. Quite apart from sort of watching them play, was to familiarise our players with them, even in appearance, because they'd never have met them, they'd never have seen them, so they were getting a chance to see who they might be marking or whatever, and that helps too, I think.
Jack Gleeson, our coach, decided that because of the pack that we had, which wasn't what you call super world class, it was a good forward pack by All Black standards, but not as good as previous years. So we decided to look at our strengths, and some of our strengths were in the backs. Myself, Brian Williams and Bruce Robertson and co, Billy Osborne. So we thought, right, let's move the ball around, let's play entertaining football, rugby that we can enjoy, and which the crowd enjoyed initially on. It was actually very, very good.
Basically, the All Blacks were obviously going to be fitter than us. They would have better teamwork, having played together for a number of weeks prior to coming to Ireland, and therefore our game plan was based upon possession of the ball first of all, which was going to be critical. No matter who you're playing, you have to have ball possession, and we recognised that the All Blacks would probably have more of the ball than we would, and therefore we had to have a situation whereby we could counter them in possession of the ball, and the first line of defence was the critical area, not to let them come through the advantage line and therefore put us under pressure.
I remember Kieran's speech before the game, and he had his leg up in a chair or a table. He was telling us how these opportunities only came by once in a lifetime. He pointed out how beatable they were because we had seen a video of them the night before out in some industrial warehouse on the Limerick-Kerry Road. And in that, he picked out a number of faults in their game. Certainly we left the room thinking that we could beat them. Maybe not convinced, but certainly with a belief that it was possible.
I think they had a very astute and shrewd coach who, from stories that I've read, I mean, they're only stories, that he delivered one of the great team talks to a bunch of Irish boys who are going to go and take on the mighty All Blacks.
My girlfriend at the time had been in Europe for quite some time, so we'd been separated for about 6 months because she was on her OE and I was obviously busy doing the rugby thing. And the night before the match was late at night. I got a knock on my door and she surprised me with a surprise visit. Well,
I always remember boxers were never allowed to be with ladies before a big fight or a big event, and I just wondered briefly whether this was someone punishing me for being reunited with my my future wife. It was, and I'm still married, so maybe it was all for the good.
I can recall going down to the ground that morning and the boys talking about all sorts of peripheral things other than rugby. And when that happens, you know that you're not going to be focused for the game, and that's exactly what happened. Once we hit the field, we knew we were in trouble.
Blows his whistle. McKechnie, the All Black fullback, kicks off.
What I do remember, I can remember Tony Ward hoisting a few beauties up to McKechnie early on. Munster's declaration of intent was very clear from the word go.
Yeah, it is a fairly traditional Munster welcome to any visiting site, to Thomond Park in particular. You test the quality of their fullback by putting a ball up early on just to see what happens.
The up and under, some of the backs don't like some of these high balls, and of course the home crowd are tremendous as well. And it's certainly even unnerving All Black, you know.
One of the ploys, of course, that Munster adopted that day, as they usually do, as every visiting team knows, and that is the famous Gary Owen.
Well, you know, the old history days, the old Gary Owen, shove it up in the air, put a lot of heat with chasers on it and let the guy that's going to take the ball, well, who wanted it? If it was perfected and honed and born in the Gary Owen and in that area, good luck to them. It worked on the day. I thought Tony Ward kicked pretty well that day.
It's a normal thing to do, and yes, it was a huge part of the Munster repertoire, and yes, we did go out to plan and do it, and you had to. I mean, you know, it's part of what Munster rugby is. I mean, the Gary Owen, it comes from Limerick.
Brian McKechnie himself was the #1 choice coming over, but was a bit unsettled early on, and as the game progressed, he dropped another high ball, and I think he lost his nerve after that.
There was a bit of a blustery wind, but it was a nice sunny afternoon. You know, the track was in good nick, and when you get a good kicker from their number 9 and 10, it puts a bit of heat on the back three.
Brian, I think, had just come into the All Black squad, and he was playing for his place in the test, and it's no better place than to test a full back than in Thomond Park.
I think the reason why the All Blacks made so many mistakes on the day is because we had them under such pressure from a defensive point of view, really. I mean, every time that we put the ball into their half, there was two of us chasing the ball the whole time, really.
Well, you know, there's a psychological element to all games, whether it's rugby, soccer, and here. As I say, there was a level of indecision in that All Blacks. They were rattled, absolutely rattled, uncharacteristically so. They had been met with a storm force. They knew they were going to have a tough game against Munster. I can't think for one moment they could have envisaged precisely what they had to face.
I think there was a nervousness crept into them from the sort of impetus of the Munster team's performance and the pressure they were putting on them, and that they were a bit edgy.
We got pressure on us, you know, things weren't working. The backline movement wasn't going as good. The lineouts and scrums are under pressure. You know, we kept finding ourselves down on our own goal line instead of at the other end of the field where you're supposed to score. So things weren't going that good.
If you think about it, that day, they were the ones that were going backwards, because even when they had the ball, they were going backwards in the tackle. We were the ones who were chasing them. And you can't really ruck properly when you're going backwards. So they never really got the chance to put their famous rucking style into action.
Defensively, our alignment was very solid. We'd worked on our alignment on several occasions in training beforehand. And man-man marking and the back row forwards as a second line of defence came across the field behind the back line. So overall, I think our defence was never suspect as such. Might have been under pressure, but never suspect.
Our game plan at all times would be, broadly speaking, to keep the ball in front of us, whether that's in the air or whether it's on the touchline or whatever, but keep it in front of us and try and keep the pressure on them. I mean, I think we know that we rarely be in a position to get good ball continuously in a match, so to give our three quarters an opportunity. You have to be much better than your opposition to enjoy that luxury.
And Wardy's kicking, crossed behind their backs, kept them pinned back all the time, and their pack going backwards, and the Munster pack going forwards. And that was the key to the game. It was so simple, but it was key to it.
Maybe we could have grabbed Tony Ward or banged him around, but you know, he's a good player. Let's be honest, we We'd try to get him, without a doubt. If we could just grab him and hold him up into one of our sides of our rucks and give him a fair taste of some 6-inch steel, then we'd let him know that, you know, OK, we're a guest in your country, but we're going to make it doubly hard for you. But we couldn't get to them.
My memories of Tony Waters, you never ever encouraged him to run because he was just so good at it, and he was physically quite strong. I was involved in any time we played against him as watching him and keeping an eye on him, and he was, I believe, a very, very underrated footballer. He had great physique, pace and deception, and I think we were probably pretty pleased to see him kicking the ball.
Such was the quality of our play up front that day that we were certainly at worst on level terms with them, and we were able to play an awful lot more off the front foot, with me given the time and space to pick my spots than we had expected going into that game, and that all came down to the quality of the forward performance that day, the collective performance.
Maybe it was sort of one of those days when the bombs went up like that, and we didn't make a particularly good job of recovering them, that we might have been thinking one game ahead and maybe not as committed as we should have been to those sort of circumstances.
No, but we knew what we had to do. I mean, each one of us had a specific job, and we helped out one another. And like Dennison set the tone. Like he creamed Stu Wilson twice, you know, in the first 10 or 15 minutes and first 10 minutes, and that just set the tone for the rest of us then thereafter, really.
A thing that I'll always remember was a tackle by Seamus Dennison, I think it was on Stuart Wilson. He shook, the ground shook with that tackle, and the crowd immediately lifted the whole lot of him. And from the word go, Munster played so well that day.
He tackled Stuart Wilson, who was their winger, who had a move. They had a move whereby he came inside the out half or the inside centre to take a ball from a back play move, and Seamus Dennison hit him in the first 6 or 7 minutes, a massive tackle, and they both went down and they were both injured.
Seamus hurt himself very badly, but Mossy Finn told him very quickly not to show any hurt and to get up and to hide it.
Well, we had this little move in the backs which involved me just coming into the back line, a little bit of a few faint defs and, you know, dummies and that, and throughout the tour it was working quite nicely. So it was a workable move and it was paying off. We just kept rolling it out. So, and unfortunately we got to Munster, and the gap opened up brilliantly as the move's supposed to, except there was this little guy called Seamus Dennison was sitting there in front of me.
Yeah, like if you had a line-up parade and said pick the rugby player, it just wouldn't be him, but he was just probably single-handedly epitomised, the whole effort of the day.
You know, he just basically smacked the living daylights out of me in a tackle.
We had seen Wilson do this in almost every match they had played, so we knew it was going to happen. And Seamus was waiting for the moment, and he didn't shirk it when it came.
I sort of dusted myself off and thought, well, I don't really want to do that again, you know, but 10 minutes later, we called the same move, thinking, well, we'll just change it slightly, but no, it didn't work, and I got hammered again. So 2 belts out of 2 moves, I just said to the guys, no, that's it, I'm out of here for the rest of the afternoon, we'll just keep moving it wide. So they'd done their work.
And you could see where they were bringing the full-back and the blindside wingers into their back line. And it helped on the day, it certainly helped on the tackle, because I think I was half expecting that he would come into the line in that particular position.
And if he broke a tackle, he was gone. And quite often, centres would stay with their men. But Seamus stepped right into the gap when he came through and hit him fairly hard.
But I mean, there was an outstanding display given by Seamus Dennison, the centre. I mean, all the backs were quite good too, but Seamus Dennison gave a cracking display that he knocked, I think it was Stuart Wilson coming in the inside. He sent him back to Auckland or wherever he comes from fairly rapidly that day,
And it was really good, and quite painful, I might add.
Certainly Stu came into the back line there once and got knocked backwards about 3 metres, and, I suppose Stu talked about that too, but, reluctant to come in again, really, wanted to watch the game, really.
Munster tackled very, very well. Seamus Dennison's tackling, Greg Barrett's tackling, all of them tackled immensely well.
To pick out one guy probably wasn't fair. It was a all over the park 15-man thing, really.
Kieran decided if if we were going to get any ball, we had to do a bit of variation. And in those days, there were very few variations used in lineouts. So he decided we'd put Foley standing at number 1, Brendan Foley standing at number 1 in one lineout. I would stand at number 2 and Mossy would stand at number 3, just to try and confuse the All Blacks somewhat. We reckon the All Blacks failed to spot that we had a second row standing at number 1 because their props were equally big. Anyway, Foley won the ball at number 1.
Well, I moved more to 1 than to 2, and we just took a fast ball really at 1. And lucky enough, I got my head set in.
He won the ball, but not cleanly. It ended up in a ruck, and I passed it to Tony, who chipped it quite shallowly, but beyond the advancing three-quarter line of the All Blacks. It bounced, and Stuart Wilson and Jimmy Bowen were both running full out for the same ball. It bounced Jimmy's way, and he was past his opposite number and running into the All Blacks half of the field. He beat the full-back with a swerve. He kept going inside the 22, and then the cover closed him down, but he held on to the ball long enough to be able to pass it inside to Christy Cantlin, who was up in support, and Christy scored from 5 or 6 yards out.
The intention was there, but you never know what way the ball is going to bounce. So equally, when you take a risky chip like that, particularly wide, if you get a bad bounce, that could have been Stu Wilson racing down the other end of the field. That is the reality. But the intention was to attempt to put it into space, to bring us through onto the ball, because their defence was very flat.
We won a line out on our own 25, and Tony got the ball and he chipped it, and to this day I would say it was probably he was taking a big chance with it, really, because it could have got anywhere. But anyway, it just seemed to fall into my lap, and I went around Stu Wilson, and I broke. I think McKegney was the full back for. I broke his tackle, and Brian Williams was coming across from the far side, and somewhere about 5 to 10 yards from the line, I offloaded to Christy, and Christy went in.
I do recall it, and you know, I think you can blame all of us. You know, the back three particularly. We're meant to cover those sorts of kicks, and but as I mentioned earlier, when you're not totally focused for the game, that's when things start to go wrong. And I remember the ball bouncing crazily, and you know, hoping to cover it and not being able to, and you know, the try being scored. So yeah, just a lack of concentration, I think.
It was a kick and chase. We scrambled, we made a mistake, we scrambled, we were under a bit of pressure, we didn't handle that pressure, they got a lucky bounce, bang, try, you know? It happens.
Now, in 10 other matches, any one thing could have gone wrong, and they just happened to go right. So, I mean, I think that reflected, I think that we got the sort of sharpness and the balance right on the day.
Munster did get the only try. It was a little bit of a blur at that stage for most of us, and these guys were coming, the red shirts were coming out of the sky in all directions, and so I can't remember a lot of the detail of the try, but it was certainly there wasn't much doubt that it was a fair try, and that was what sunk us.
Some people listen to themselves rather than listen to what others say. These people don't come along very often. But when they do, they remind us that once you set out on a path, even though critics may doubt you, it's okay to believe that there is no can't, won't, or impossible. They remind us that it's okay to believe impossible is nothing.
Look here. Son, look at you. You out, son.
What I really want to see is the technology room. I want to know what they've done with all my computers for schools vouchers. Oh, there we are. Come on. Where are all my ones?
Computers for Schools is back on, and with your help, we're hoping to give away more computers and software than ever before.
Oh, look, there's Freddie. That must be my computer there, then. Oh, dear. We'll have to collect some more vouchers. It's gone horribly wrong, hasn't it?
Tesco. Every little helps.
The Sunday Times completes any perfect Sunday. With in-depth Irish and international sports coverage and household names like Paul Kimmage and Malcolm O'Kelly in a dedicated 30-page section, the Sunday Times is the newspaper for sport.
When your face doesn't shine, your confidence does. New Nivea for Men Oil Control Moisturiser, specially formulated for oily skin to moisturize without the shine. Oil Control Face Care from Nivea for Men.
It's so important to make someone happy. Make just one someone happy. Make just one heart-to-heart you. You sing to one smile that cheers you, one face that lights when it nears you.
If you've had a mortgage for a few years, now's the time to think about switching, because with First Active's new current account mortgage, you can save yourself thousands in interest. You see, on the one hand, you've got your current account, earning you no interest. And on the other, your mortgage, costing you a fortune in interest. The current account mortgage uses the money you have in the one to reduce the money you owe in the other every day, saving you thousands in interest and knocking years off your mortgage. So call now on 1850 678 910 or click on firstactive.ie and see how much you could save.
I think one of the things that we were aware of was Hayden was a very good line-out player. I mean, a proven player of international world class. And whilst we had Moss and Donald Spring, I felt that we'd be under pressure in the lineouts. Now, it so happened that we were defending most of the match. I mean, they had territorial success in the match, and most of the lineouts were the All Blacks lineouts, and not ours.
We were being beaten so badly in the lineouts that we actually made a conscious decision early in the second half to stop competing in the lineout on their ball and to just put pressure on their scrum half afterwards. Now, their lineout was like a sieve that day. We just simply poured through the lineout. They took no action during the game to remedy it, which is surprising considering the people that they had in their team. But in fact, their scrum half, I'd say, will never forget it as long as he lives, because every time he got a ball from a lineout, he got 3 or 4 Munster men with it.
Well, they were good. They were good players, and as I said, they were good line-out men. And you have to realise when you're playing against these guys that you're not going to get an awful lot of ball. So you try to disrupt them as much as possible.
Had we had more lineouts in their half, we had intended to shorten the lineout, but that didn't materialise. But what did happen was, and which exceeded all our expectations, I think, was the pressure that Brendan Foley and Moss and Spring and so forth put on the All Blacks line-out and the All Blacks scrum half.
The strategy in the line-outs going out was to try and get as much ball as we could. We realised very quickly we weren't going to get any of their ball. We got some of our own, not an awful lot. Line-outs in those days were very different. They were a genuine contest. They were clearly better than us in the line-out. But their line-out, as I say, was like a sieve. And rugby is a different game now. In those days, there was such a thing as bad ball, and the rule was let the opposition have a bad ball rather than win a bad ball on your own side. So we let them have a lot of bad ball, which in turn we converted into very good ball for ourselves.
I probably remember the game against Munster for a little bit of success at line-out time that I had marking Moss Keane, and You know when you're having a little bit of success when the opposition halfback calls the line-out call 22, 34, 22, and Moss Keane turns and says to him, "Oh, fuck no, not me again."
I can't remember any great detail about what happened just before half-time and immediately after half-time and how we coped with the pressure. Obviously, we must have coped reasonably well because they didn't score. In any game when you're leading, it's important not to concede a score coming up to half-time or immediately after half-time. I think when they didn't score early in the second half, we began to get a little bit nervous that something was going to happen.
The pressure was quite severe in the second half as they continued to put us under severe pressure because possession was coming more and more to them, and we just had to continue to tackle and to keep them at bay.
Most of the All Blacks play, you know, they develop it as they go on in the match, and their fitness levels are usually greater than ours, and they can find chinks in the armour. So I think like the fact that, you know, we stuck to the cause, fit enough to last the match, and had the 9-point lead, which was what, 2 scores at the time ahead. You know, that gives you extra inspiration. And the crowd, as I say, like, you know, I mean, you've got mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and clubmates all around. Everywhere you look, you've got, you know, someone in the crowd, you know. So you don't want to go backwards in a scrum, you don't want to miss a tackle, you don't want to lose a line out. You know, you want to make sure that you do everything you've learned and practiced for the previous part of your career comes out in the day.
I think that the performance against the All Blacks in behind the scrum, which is not often very obvious, but the physical commitment of the players from the backs that afternoon was absolutely incredible. And I think that the way the players threw themselves into the thing, Larry Maloney, Seamus Dennison, was what made it impossible almost for New Zealand to come back. And New Zealand were a very fine side, and New Zealand have many times had to work their way back out of very difficult situations. But I think the total and absolute commitment by all of the Munster players, from full back right through to the front row, was what kept New Zealand at bay.
And then in the second half, they held when the All Blacks came at them, which they did a bit. Munster held out. As I say, I think I'm right to say they didn't concede a penalty, certainly not in their own half. In the second half.
Caniff is a fantastic captain. He always kept us calm, never put his team under pressure, and above all, he was so brave that everybody knew he wasn't going to ask anybody to do anything he wouldn't do himself. As the game went on, he knew that we were in with a genuine chance. He never panicked. He kept everybody calm and controlled. Some people were getting very excited as the game went on that something might be bound to happen, which always puts you in a vulnerable position. But Caniff kept people cool and, you know, kept us going right until the end.
They were putting in lots of big tackles, and you know, when you're having to defend and use up a lot of energy like that, often the energy reserves go. And in the last 20 minutes, you know, All Black rugby was all about you know, finishing strongly and coming home, and I guess we expected that to happen.
You know, we felt that if the All Blacks were retreating and going backwards, then they couldn't score against us, and the chances are we could put them under more pressure by forcing them to turn and go backwards. So Tony Ward and I were working on getting quick ball off the set pieces, and Tony either distributing it wide or putting it in behind them.
Of course, the famous incident when Stu Wilson, this great wing, absolutely made a mess of the ball behind his own line and touched down for a 5-yard scrum when he really shouldn't have. That just showed that they were getting a bit fidgety, to say the least.
That incident, again, where Wilson did something that he looked back on now when he sees the video and he says, why did I go back over the line when I tried to put the ball away? But you do it under pressure.
And I remember that distinctly, and I don't think it was a necessary scrum 5. But again, there were red jerseys in the corner of his vision all the time, and that creates that situation.
Yeah, that was just another bumbling mistake by me that I had that day. You know, it wouldn't be one of your great games that I've played in the black jersey, but again, it was a good kick from Ward. Tony Ward just banged it down. It bounced a little bit, jagged here, jagged there, and I just sort of fell over, stumbled, gathered the ball up, and had a look, and all of a sudden the heat was on me. See, they had good chasers. You know, a kick is a kick, but if you've got lots of good chasers on it, the chasers make the kick look good. Chasers make bad kicks look good. So they had plenty of chasers. I looked up and thought, well, I ain't going to run out of here. So I just dotted down, caused the 5-yard scrum, and Tony Ward banged over a drop goal. So I thought, as we walked back the halfway, I thought, well, I've done my bit. Yeah, that's fantastic, you know.
And that gave us the opportunity then to take advantage. We were looking for the drop goal because it gave us a foothold deep in their territory inside the 22. And it came off. They messed our scrum around. They got a very strong 8-man scrum on. Colin managed to pick the ball, feed it back, and as I said earlier, I had the time and space just to knock it over. And that was the winning of the game, as it turned out, because they weren't going to come back from 12.
And that was it. That was the game. You know, we thought, well, what are we going to do? I wasn't going to run that ball back out of them because 5 of those mad guys were coming down the track, and I thought, well, I've been hit by these guys all day. I'm not looking after my body, thank you.
It was 9-0 at that stage, right? And the All Blacks were on their back foot, and the confidence was growing, you know? I mean, it was really there at this stage. And under those circumstances, hardly ever misses.
Tony's super drop goals under severe pressure. They were excellent. And I remember the last 10 minutes of the match because I knew we had it won, and it was a lovely 10 minutes to play out, playing the All Blacks, knowing you were going to win the match with 10 minutes to go.
Match over, 12-0, the All Blacks failed to score. The only time in history they've ever failed to score in a match in Ireland, either against an international or a provincial side.
Donald Spring, another one of the fine Munster players. It's over! Munster have won! History has been made!
I can remember the ball had just been kicked away from where the two packs were when the final whistle went, and it seemed as if no time had elapsed from the time the whistle went to the time we were absolutely engulfed by spectators from all sides. We were just swamped. We barely had time to shake hands with our opposite numbers before the crowd had actually invaded the pitch, and Tony Ward, I can remember, was carried off shoulder high.
So when the final whistle went, and it's the only time I've experienced it in sports, sadly, I see it in GAA from time to time, but to see grown men crying at the end of a game, I'd never seen it before. And again in rugby, it just wasn't at the time that teams did a lapse of honours or anything like that. We went into the dressing room after that game, and the crowd just went berserk outside. There was no way they were leaving that ground without getting us back out onto the field again. And they did, and it was just, I can still remember coming back out, and you just had the shivers down your spine. It was just, everything about the occasion just smacked of raw Limerick and Munster passion.
And I mean, they wanted to touch their players. Normally the crowd would rush out and they'd try and get an autograph of the All Blacks, because 9 times out of 10 the All Blacks would have won. That day they basically just bypassed us and went straight to hug their players.
Well, I suppose ecstasy is the closest thing I could recollect. You know, people racing on them with their fellas around, I feel, faster than we'd ever run in the day, you know. A couple of friends of mine, like from other clubs as well, you know, we're all one.
Well, as we know, I can barely remember, but I think all the pubs were full, and the atmosphere in every pub in Limerick was brilliant. And it took for weeks, I mean, for years afterwards, that anybody, if you travelled the Munster team that won in '78, where are they and where are they now? And, you know, it's great memories.
You got to let them have their moment, you know, and that's a moment in Munster rugby history that is recorded in the books, and it's a talking point from one generation to the other. Those that saw the game were fantastic. Those that played in it was even better. But, you know, the whole area there glow in the warmth that someone's done the job against the Blacks.
The sad aftertale to that game, of course, was that after the match, Donald Caniff was told that his father had died.
It must have been very, very difficult for Donald, you know, to go from the height, the euphoria of the ultimate moment in a sporting career, his dad listening to it on the radio. I just don't know how he would have coped on the journey down to Cork and just putting it all together. But certainly, there's no doubt it put a dampener on the evening for us.
Yeah, when the game was over, this was one of the proudest moments of my rugby life, having played on a team that beat the All Blacks. And obviously I was elated. When I came back in off the pitch, unfortunately I got a telephone call from a family friend to say that my father had been taken ill and that he was in the hospital. I went back to the dressing room and got another phone call 2 minutes later, in fact, to be told that my father had died by the same caller, a chap called Ken Stanton, who was a family friend. And unfortunately I then had to leave immediately and return to Cork to the family home to be with the family.
I remember seeing Kieran call Caniff out the dressing room, and I knew from Kieran's face something was wrong. Mossy then told me what had happened, and it clearly put a big dampener on the whole event. I mean, everybody was thinking of Donald more at that stage, and it brought back to us all very quickly. It's only a game.
And Russ Thomas, their manager, I'll always remember standing in the as the teams came off the field at the end, clapping, and he gave, very sporting, clapping the Munster team off the field. And then later, when all of us adjourned to the hotel in Limerick, the Limerick Inn, where we regaled ourselves after this great win, the All Blacks arrived in single file and came into the hotel singing.
Well, we obviously had been beaten by a team that was better than us on the day, and we decided that we wanted to honour them. The fact that they had beaten us, first Irish team to win, and in the best traditions of Irish rugby, we thought we'll walk in there or march in there singing that little ditty. And I recall it was very well received, and I think the Irishmen just felt, well, these guys can, they take their wins, but they can also take a loss as well.
They took to the feet very well, the players as such. I remember they came into the meal that night in single file, and it was the first time I came across, they came in singing, hi ho, it's on the piss we go, but I mean, they actually took it very well.
Couldn't recall the song itself, but they were in jovial mood and accepted defeat as it should be taken, even though it was a major setback on their tour.
Congratulated us after the game and wished us the best as their manager, Russ Thomas. I mean, I thought they were very gracious, and I think if I remember correctly, they came into the dinner marching and singing a song and that sort of thing, and they were bloody good. But Maury was a great captain too, and I think his example spread throughout the team.
And as I recall, we went to an upstairs room for the reception, and I think we actually, players lined up, hand on shoulder and one behind the other, and went into the reception singing.
It was a very, very memorable, enjoyable experience. You couldn't help but get involved with their absolute joy and delight in beating us.
Yeah, they made an effort, fair play to them. I think they made an effort, which would have been difficult for them. And usually, I mean, the teams don't mix that much, especially touring teams. Like, they've kind of just like, I suppose, getting ready for the next match. So I suppose it was an eye opener for them. Like, we probably did them a favour because they lost no more matches on the tour, did they?
If anything, it would be almost a disadvantage to Ireland that we won, because the All Blacks would have got together and said, we've got to sort ourselves out, and they, I think, if anything, would have been more determined than they normally would have been to beat Ireland. So I think our win, in that sense, wouldn't have helped Ireland a great deal.
Yes, that's a fair comment. Had we not lost to Munster, we probably would have lost to Ireland 4 days later. It was an equally tough battle. We had more resolve within the team by that stage. All Black teams don't very often lose back-to-back, and this is one of those occasions when we knew we had to dig deep and see the Irish off.
Burton trying to take Brad Johnson down, but that was another good clean strike. Donaldson to Bruce. Bruce with the left-footed drop goal. The referee's hand goes up and it's through, and the All Blacks are in the lead.
It was an amateur era, but when you were on tour, it was as close to professionalism as you got. So New Zealand were professionals on tour at that stage. So they were fitter physically in terms of conditioning to meet the challenge of another big game 4 days later or 5 days later.
The New Zealanders certainly had learned from Munster, and they were wounded in Munster, no doubt about it. And they had a good team in Munster as well. Yeah? So they were now back to their uppers, and they really had to get back their pride to go home. Because the All Blacks, like, if they go home losing, there's something else to I mean, there's hell to pay, there's chaos over it. So they felt they had to beat Ireland. They had to win. There was no question they wanted to win, they had to win. So I would have said that Ireland, to beat them, would have had to put up an incredible performance to do it.
Ward then round the corner. It's high enough, and the crowd seems to say it's straight enough.
once you do get beaten, you take a good look at yourself. And we really looked at our game plan and decided we had to be a little bit more physical and be a little bit more dominant and try and take control of games more so that we had more control over them.
To Bruce going for the second drop goal, and it's there.
I thought that they got their act together again, But I suppose like any team who goes undefeated, an odd defeat now and then will inspire them to actually, get back on track. So we probably did them a favour.
Tony Ward then. Oh, it looks a good one.
By God, when we lose, we're a bad mother to tangle with afterwards. So when we sat down and studied what went wrong, righto, the old coach got up and said, that was crap. We tried to play open rugby, we got smacked by these kamikaze boys from Munster. That's the end. That's our last loss. We are going to go back to good old-fashioned Kiwi rugby. We're going to play it tight in the forwards. We're going to get our half back and our standoffs to boot the ball down track. And you, Stu Wilson, are not going to run too much with the ball now. All you're going to do is chase it, put a lot of pressure on like Munster did to us, and then say to the opposition, right, get out of this crap.
Certainly on the Saturday they played a different type of rugby against us. They played a Munster-style game. That's the reality of it. Having said that, in a test game is always going to be a lot tighter anyway, and you do tend to play the game very much because the tempo is that bit quicker in the face of the opposition. But I do think they learned a few serious lessons.
Having played the match myself for Ireland against the All Blacks on the following Saturday, I think the All Blacks were afraid. They didn't want 2 successive defeats on tour, and I think their prime motive was at least to win internationals. And as such, I'd say they put up the shutters and closed the game down. Probably lucky to win the finish. There was only a try conceded.
Dalton again, hoisting it for Hayden. Hayden to Donaldson. Donaldson trying to go for the corner flag. Has he made the line? Clive Norling has got his hand up, and the New Zealanders are dancing with joy.
At the end of the day, when we walked off Cardiff Arms Park after beating the Barbarians and completing a Grand Slam tour, we walked in and said, Munster, you may have beaten us, and we may have changed our style, and we may have been really boring, but we won.
They were unbeaten on that trip, except for that match. It's extraordinary. They'd be very conscious of the reaction at home, because it's like, as you know yourself, it's another religion over there,
They've always been magnanimous about it. Hayden made it very clear that if they were going to lose to anybody on the tour, they were happier to lose to an Irish team than to some of the other teams that they played against.
In that situation there, whereby a provincial team can beat a touring side, it has to uplift the nation itself. It probably was the forerunner to future victories of the Irish team.
After that match, that Munster team went on to win the Grand Slam in the Interprovincial Championship. That season, in the 78-79 international season, Ireland won 1, drew 2, and lost 1 of their matches, which was a marked contrast to what had gone before. And were extremely unlucky to lose the one they did, which they lost at 24-21, which against Wales. They drew with France 9-all. They drew 11-11 with Scotland. They beat England at Lansdowne Road, and they lost 24-21 to Wales, which was some contrast to the record that had been for the 3 previous seasons. So it had a huge impact, not alone in terms of quality and the quality of the play. It had a huge impact in terms of spectator interest and appeal, and suddenly the whole scene was lifted.
The one thing I'd like to bring to my grave with me, God forbid, another couple of years, would be the ball that was used against the All Blacks in 1978. There were 3 balls used that day, and I happened to get one off of Cyril Kiley, who gave it to me. And it's autographed by all the team, by one player. Unfortunately, Donald Cannon's father died, and he couldn't autograph the ball, but it's autographed by everybody else.
Their strengths was their unity. Their strengths were that they were playing for Munster. Their strengths were that they had a home crowd and a home game. And that also they took strength that they were playing one of the better sides in the world that had great tradition and history. And I think that link between Ireland and New Zealand still lives today.
Christmas.